The agenda around community assets and community ownership of assets has been a bit mixed over the last few years. A lot of progress on one hand has been made. There have been policy changes that have been positive. There have been funding streams that have helped. Social investment has played a part, a small part relatively, in recent years in trying to change this agenda. But actually it still feels as if big successes are a little bit out of reach. And there's a big risk at the moment with local authorities in particular, the pressure on them to get short-term revenue from selling off resources. So we're launching today a new report on community assets, the future of community assets, to try and in effect reset the agenda, to re-examine the benefits of community asset ownership. And the centrepiece of the call is to call for a £1 billion community asset investment plan. £1 billion, I feel like Dr. Evil. It sounds bold, but in the context of the potential of hundreds of billions of pounds of public assets being sold off and lost to common ownership in the next few years, it's a modest amount of investment. If you think about some of the other areas of capital expenditure that government manages to find, pothole fund, £200 million was found about 18 months ago to fix our roads, then this is an area actually which requires investment, and you get huge returns and local economic multipliers from investing in community assets. So it's a very bold ambition, £1 billion of investment. We're not asking it for all to come from the government. We're asking for about half of it to come from the new Dormant Assets Fund that is being examined at the moment by the Dormant Assets Commission. We expect central government to be able to lead the way, to contribute towards that fund, but also the lottery, other funders, social investors as well can play a part in making that mix. The fund would then be used to fund capital purchases, renovation of assets. It would fund feasibility, pre-development work, early stage development work for community organisations, and also a national centre of excellence or unit that would provide support, advice, guidance, and help the process go smoothly. So we need your help in getting this message out. We've produced a report today. I urge you to read that, but also we want to get the word out much more. So we're going to start that off today by taking a picture, not of me this time, thankfully, taking a picture of you, the crowd, because some of you may have noticed there are some slightly suspicious characters sitting in the middle. If we can have the lights up in the auditorium. If you look behind you at the front, you'll be able to see. If you could stand up, guys. It says £1 billion. So the reason we're talking about community assets and devolution and our Keep It Local focus on commissioning is to try and secure commitments to see positive change. And I think it is important for us to be bold, given all of this uncertainty, given it is difficult to get messages that cut through. We're going to try and do everything we can to raise the profile and the importance of the things that we collectively care about. We have to activate the thing that we have in spades across this network, which is determination. And I think I've always said that when I first arrived here about 2.5 years ago, spent a lot of time talking to members, going out and meeting people, and people always said, what is it that unites locality members? Is it the type of organisation? Is it the size of organisation? And the thing that I always kind of said was, it was the sense of bloody-minded determination to do things despite what was happening locally. And that's what we need to make sure that we've got in spades and that we're drawing on. So there are opportunities. There are some amazing examples of people doing some fantastic things that are making a real difference to people's lives. You'll hear about lots of those examples as we go through this convention, and it's an important part of the function of this event that we do feel motivated and inspired from each other, regenerate, I guess, our levels of enthusiasm, optimism, and determination. And I think that the one kind of overwhelming message that we get every single year is that it is a restorative opportunity for us all to kind of feel that level of support. So share your battle stories and give each other kind of comfort hugs and all of that kind of stuff and motivation. And let's make sure that we make the most of this next couple of days. It's been really, really great to spend time with you again over the last year, and I'm looking forward to talking to you all over the next couple of days. So thank you very much.
Now there's a breath of fresh air that's going right the way across all the political parties and has been certainly over this last year about the recognition of the role of community and community organisations in developing thriving communities, but also in giving people a voice. I'm visiting local authorities right the way across the country, and I can speak for the Labour local authorities that I visited. Many of them now are developing community strategies based upon community empowerment and also based upon asset transfer. Sometimes, I admit, it is driven by the appalling austerity measures that are being taken by the government, the cuts that are being inflicted upon local councils by central government. But usually, it is an honest approach to how an asset can be best preserved by the local community and better managed and better utilised. But there are too many cases, I admit, of a lack of community engagement and a lack of listening to local communities with regard to their asset sales. Part of that, as I say, is in relation to the tough times that local councils are experiencing because of the withdrawal of grant. And I have to say also the unfairness in the distribution of cuts and grant withdrawal, with some of the most deprived areas being hit the hardest. However, now's the time to start thinking again and start thinking about how we develop, certainly from the Labour Party, our policies. I welcome the concept of a community investment, a community asset investment programme. It's something that I'll take back to our party in our policy discussions over this coming few months. We're now preparing for the potential of a May general election. That means our policy programming is now being developed faster than would normally be the case, and we'll want to have at least some form of provisional manifesto in place by early in the new year in case that general election comes. And it's interesting, the development of our programme at the moment and our policies towards that manifesto is being reshaped because the Labour Party now has 600,000 members. We're the largest political party in Western Europe. And it's interesting that many of those members have come from community campaigning at the grassroots level, and they're bringing their expertise into the party. And one of the issues that they've raised is the concrete examples, time and time again, where communities have sought and campaigned to reserve their community assets when they've been threatened with sale or closure. So I'm hoping that the concept of the Community Asset Fund will be one that we'll be able to readily endorse as we move towards that manifesto phase, and certainly it's one that I'll be arguing for. And I don't think, just to respond to Tony, I don't think £1 billion is too ambitious. I think it's a realistic figure that over a 10-year period you can see the investment rewards driving from it.
Salford, it's a tough place. It's a pretty resilient and gritty place as well. It can always come back after troubles. But I'll never forget the woman who said to me, and we'd had every bit of regeneration in Salford. We'd had SRB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, single regeneration budget, health action zone, education action zone, New Deal for communities. You know, we just kind of got it all because we were so poor and desperate. And this lady said to me once at a community meeting, she said, you know, Hazel, what I really hate about all of the regeneration initiatives is that we have to spend our time, and she called it being on an ugly parade rather than a beauty parade. She said, we have to be on the ugly parade, and we have to tell people what we can't do, and how needy we are, and how deprived we are, and how terrible we are. You know, and the health service does needs assessments, for goodness sake. She said, we've got fantastic assets in our community. We might not have, you know, many people who've gone on to great forms of higher education, but if we get a community meeting, there'll be somebody around that table who's a great plumber. There'll be somebody who's a decorator, somebody who's a joiner, somebody who's a plasterer. They can get things done. There'll be women who absolutely have got skills and talents in that community to make a difference. And very often it was the women who were making the difference in the poorest communities that I knew. And that affected me throughout the whole of my political life. It was about why can't we look at what people can do rather than what they can't do. And you'll know, because you're professionals, a lot of you, around asset-based community development, you know, working about what we've got rather than what we haven't. And I would just say that some of the competing for bids, some of the parades that you have to do, actually, if you're not careful, and it's not done with malice at all, but if you're not careful, it destroys the very self-confidence of those communities that you are desperately trying to build. So I would say my starting point is always, what is the talent and skill and richness that we have in this community, and then how do we build on it? And that takes me absolutely to the work that you're doing, the report that you've launched today on localities and places and spaces, all of that asset transfer that I established through the asset transfer unit, all of that was about what can people do, given the right guidance, backup, support and resources to be able to make a difference in their own local communities. And very often that was around assets. Not solely around assets, because you need people. I think people are the biggest asset in any community. Again, it's not just bricks and mortar. But if you've got an asset, then you've got something that gives you security. Hopefully you've got something that you can raise finance against. You've got some higher degree of independence than if you're just in receipt of public money from grants, loans, wherever it comes from. If you've got your own asset, then you are a more powerful body. And that's why it was so important to me to try and give people some sustainable income streams that would last beyond whichever government was in power, beyond whichever policy was flavour of the month, so you would have independence and autonomy to be able to make those decisions. So assets were really important.